Hello and welcome to the Final Frontiersmen. I'm your host Bill and this is Star Trek Adventures Academy. In this series we are talking about the fundamentals of how to play Star Trek Adventures to be a refresher's course for players new and old, anyone who just needs to brush up on the rules. This is what we are doing here. In lesson 1 we covered the basic task rules and how to do the general mechanics of the game, which takes up 80% of the game. And this episode, lesson 2, we are going to finish the most important fundamental aspect of the game, the two currencies, momentum and threat. As always, if I say anything that is not correct according to the rules, please point it out to me in the comments below or send me a message and I will fix it, because the goal of this is to help players avoid making mistakes, avoid making common mistakes that I've seen in many YouTube videos and I have made myself as I was learning to play. So without further ado, let's get into the small window and let's start with momentum. And momentum is the player's currency. It's the blue icons or the blue chips if you're using that. Momentum represents the opportunities and the advantages that come up through players' actions and their cooperation, their teamwork, working together, building against the odds to help each other succeed and to make things easier and better for them. So that is momentum, the player currency. You start the game, you start each episode of the game or adventure, whatever you refer to it in your game. I call it episodes. You start each episode with 0 momentum. You have to gain it through the course of play. The way you gain it is when you roll more successes than needed to pass the difficulty of a task. So for example, if you are rolling on a difficulty 1 task and you happen to roll 3 successes, those 2 extra successes become momentum for you. So when you get the momentum, you can use it right away, or you can bank it into a pool, and this pool is shared with all players. So momentum is a shared resource. The momentum in the pool caps at 6. So again, all the players are going to be sharing this momentum, but you can only have a maximum of 6 points in it at any one time. Every player doesn't have their own individual pool. Please remember that it's all a common shared resource. So if you have already 6 momentum in the pool and you gain more momentum through a rule, it is in your favor to actually spend it on something, or else it's just going to be lost. So keep that in mind. And another very critical critical rule of momentum is at the end of each scene, you lose 1 point of momentum from your pool. So, well, first let me say what counts as a scene is very flexible, just like everything in Star Trek Adventures. But generally, it's when there's a passage of time from one situation into the next. It doesn't necessarily mean when the camera is moving to a different location, when the situation is still basically the same. So if you could imagine the Enterprise is under attack in Star Trek The Next Generation, you see them on the bridge, they're reacting, they're doing their thing. It cuts down to engineering, Geordi's down there doing his thing. You cut to sickbay, you see Dr. Crusher helping the injured. That's all basically the same scene. It's not you're cutting each time the camera is going. So it's up to the GM, it's up to how your adventure is paced, but when a scene changes, 1 momentum is lost from the pool. So it kind of encourages you to use it, or you're going to lose it anyhow. When do you use momentum? Or when can you use momentum is a key point. Momentum in general is used after a successful task roll. You roll your task, you succeed, you maybe gain momentum, or maybe you have it in the pool. You could use it from either source, but you succeed, so you use the momentum to make your success a little better, or to help your teammates succeed in what they are going to do to follow up, or maybe change the situation, the circumstances that you are in due to what your action just was with that task roll. So for using momentum in the general terms, you need to succeed at a task roll, and then momentum enhances that. However, you will notice there are some uses of momentum in the rulebook which are listed as immediate. It's called an immediate momentum spend. Immediate momentum spends are different because they are not tied to a task roll. You do not have to wait for the outcome of a task roll in order to use any action that is called an immediate momentum spend. So these are, if you remember back in lesson 1, when you're buying extra dice, that counts as an immediate momentum spend, and it is listed as such in the rulebook because you are buying the dice before you make the task roll. So it doesn't depend on you actually rolling the dice to do it. You do it before. So immediate spends can happen anytime where they fit. And they are, again, in the rulebook labeled immediate. Or you might see a parentheses I in there. That means immediate momentum spend. One other very important point about immediate momentum spends are they can be purchased. The action that is an immediate momentum spend can be purchased by either spending momentum or gaining threat for the GM. And it could be a mixture. You could pay for the whole thing with momentum. You could pay for the whole immediate spend with threat. Or you could split the difference, have 1 point of momentum, 2 points of threat, 2 momentum, 1 threat. Whatever it may be, it's mix and match, whatever you want. So immediate spends only regular momentum spends that are tied to the results of a task roll. Again, it has to be a successful task roll. Regular momentum spends you cannot use threat for. So keep that in mind when you are playing the game and you want to use momentum. If it's something that does not need a task roll involved, you don't have to roll, you don't have to get a result to do it. That's an immediate spend, and you can substitute threat for it. If it is something that is tied to the result of a task, odds are that is not going to be an immediate spend. You cannot use threat for it. Simple as that. Momentum spends are generally, you can only do once per action. So if it's this spend, it'll tell you what it does. You can only do that action, that momentum action, one time, unless it says repeatable. So you might see that with parentheses R. God, I really need to work on speaking. Parentheses R is repeatable. So you could do that multiple times for however much momentum you have. Or if it's immediate and repeatable, you could do it possibly an infinite number of times, unless it says you cannot, simply because you can generate as much threat as you want. Would be crazy, but generally you could do it, but odds are that situation won't come up. So let's move next to common uses of momentum. These are not exhaustive. These are just the main ways you see momentum in play. So common use, first of all, create advantage. This is after you do your task roll, you spend 2 momentum and you could create an advantage that sticks. It leaves a positive trait on the scene or on the action, whatever it may be, based upon the task roll that you just did. And as you can tell, because it is tied to a task roll, that is not an immediate spend. You have to use momentum for it. The next one is called, in the original core rulebook, it's called create problem. But the Klingon core rulebook has a very, as a way of making these momentum spends and other language in the book a little more understandable at a glance and direct. So it's called create problem, but in the Klingon book, it's called increase difficulty. And 10 points to Gryffindor if you can figure out what the create problem does. You increase the difficulty. It's 2 momentum and you raise the level of difficulty up. So 1 to 2, 2 to 3, whatever it is, to momentum. It is done before a task roll, so it's an immediate spend. You could use threat for it, and it's repeatable, so you could raise it multiple levels for every 2 points that you use. Then there is obtain information. Obtain information is really important in this game, so it's something especially the science officer, ops officer, you should really look into, but all players should be using obtain information, one of the great uses of momentum. This is repeatable. You can ask the GM any question about a scene. The GM must answer truthfully for this question, but that doesn't mean they have to give you all the details, all the information. They can hold back things from you that you wouldn't know, but they have to answer it truthfully. So they can't lie to you and trick you into doing something that you wouldn't do in the first place. And the probably the last main one that you use momentum for is called create opportunity, but in the Klingon book it is referred to as buy D20s. Makes a lot of sense when you hear it that way. So create opportunity, it's from 1 to 6 points of momentum. It's immediate, it's repeatable, up to 6 points clearly. This is where you buy up to 3 extra dice for your task roll, which we covered in lesson 1. So if you missed that and you're a little shaky on how that's done and the little ins and outs of what free dice do in that situation when you want to buy and you get free dice, I refer you back to lesson 1. Please take a look at that. Momentum can also be used for a variety of other things, such as paying for opportunity costs for equipment and just all sorts of stuff. Be creative. Don't worry if it's not listed in the book. Try something. Say, I would like to do this. Could I spend some momentum to have this happen? And it's up to the GM, of course, but yeah, be creative. Momentum is your tool, your currency to help you rewrite the story or bend the story in favor of the players. So there you go. There's one more momentum topic that I need to cover. It's a special type of momentum, and it's called bonus momentum. And bonus momentum comes from some talents or situations or even roll bonus for some characters, like the I believe the chief science officer gains bonus momentum when they do when they use sensors or scanning for things. Bonus momentum is a different beast from regular momentum. So what bonus momentum is, sometimes it stipulates how you can use it, but it will tell you in the talent or whatever the situation is, gain X amount of bonus momentum for this task. The difference of bonus momentum is you cannot bank it into the shared momentum pool. It has to be spent or it's lost. So you need to think of something to use in the moment, which, for example, the science officer, their bonus momentum in that is used for obtain information. So they do a sensor sweep, they automatically gain 1 free chance of asking a question for obtain information. Or one of the more popular talents to have for young officers is the untapped potential. Untapped potential says you have a chance of gaining some bonus momentum. This is bonus momentum, so you have to use it in the moment or it's gone. So regular momentum can be banked. Bonus momentum cannot. So please keep that in mind. Okay? That's pretty much all of the big points about momentum, which leads threat. Threat is the opposite. Whereas momentum is the player's currency, threat is the GM's currency. And threat represents the unknown, the dangers, the unforeseen circumstances that may arise while you are out exploring, or the consequences of an action that you have taken. Because when you roll a complication, that might generate threat for you. So Sometimes people describe it, and I have done so in the past, as the negative currency, but I want to avoid saying that, because it's not. It's just the GM's currency. And let's get into that. So momentum, we talked about, you start with 0 in the game. The players start with nothing. However, with threat, it's a little different. The GM starts with typically 2 points of threat for every player in the episode. You can adjust this. That is only the standard, 2 per player. But let's say it's a more lighthearted episode. It's not going to be as dangerous or as serious. You could say I'm only getting 1 threat per player this episode. Or maybe you have the big season finale, huge danger on the way. You're saying you're getting 3 threat per player, or however much you want. But I would recommend not going over 3 if you can help it, unless it's something disastrous. And we'll get into the reasons why very soon. The other thing, unlike momentum, the threat pool that you build up as a GM has no limit. So momentum caps at 6. You do not have a cap, and there are players I've heard who have gone well into nearly the triple digits. We're talking about 70, 80 points of momentum, or not momentum, threat built up. That's horrifying, but it can happen. There's a lot of ways that can happen. So there's no limit to the threat pool. The threat works for the GM in a very similar way that momentum works for the players. However, it works in that way mainly for enemy characters, antagonistic characters. But even so, I don't want it to be seen as the negative currency. So where you can buy dice with momentum for the player characters, you can use threat to buy dice for the enemy, the bad guys, to roll. So I want to specify, because there's a little asterisk coming up. Threat in that situation is used for enemy characters, antagonistic characters. Okay, let's just go to how to gain threat first. I'll get to the asterisks soon enough. So how do you gain threat? How do you gain threat? In momentum, it's by rolling extra successes. However, there's a whole variety of ways for the GM to gain threat. You could gain threat from the player. The player can give it to you through the immediate momentum spends that I spoke of before, because they can gain threat rather than use their own momentum. So you might get it directly from the players. You can get it from complications, as I alluded to just a few moments ago, where player rolls a 20. Instead of putting a complication on the scene, you can push the complication to the side and instead take it as 2 threat. They describe it in the book as being you are basically delaying the bad thing that happens from that roll. So complication is basically 2 threat. Any extra successes rolled by the enemy, by the antagonistic NPC, just like the players, extra successes in this case, their momentum, you can't use momentum as the GM, so that is banked for you as threat. Same situation, if it was a 1 difficulty task and you rolled 3 successes, then that enemy NPC gains 2 points of threat into the threat pool. There's also some situations that in the story are threatening on their own. So maybe a very dangerous enemy in your story has a threatening presence about them. So just the introduction of this threatening circumstance can gain threat for the threat pool. And there's also actions that, again, the players could do that generate or promote, I should say, promote more violence, or a less Starfleety approach. It's a more aggressive approach that can gain threat. So things like items that have escalation costs, like if you're bringing a phaser type 3, a phaser rifle, that's pretty hardcore. You're giving a threatening stance that generates the escalation costs in threat for the GM, or even the torpedo spread for firing starship combat. Firing torpedoes, you could do a spread instead of one torpedo, which is dangerous enough. A spread increases the threat that you gain by using a lethal action. So there's a lot of ways to gain threat as the GM. That's why the pool keeps building and building and building. So let's go, how do you spend the threat? So threat is used, as I mentioned before, it's used by enemy NPCs, the antagonistic NPCs, just like momentum. And here's where I'm putting the asterisks. GMs, of course, you're controlling all the NPCs in the game. You'll be controlling friendly NPCs as well. And there will be times where that NPC that you are controlling is in an action scene, or the players want that NPC to perform a task. In those situations, you should allow not only the players to roll the dice for that character, but also they get to determine if the character, that NPC, is going to enhance the roll with momentum. Because friendly players, friendly NPCs do not use threat. Threat is only for the enemy, for the antagonist. So if a friendly NPC needs to do something like create an advantage, roll extra dice, that has to come from the momentum. That's the player's pool. So you should leave all those choices to the players, whether it's done or not. There we go. Okay, it's also used, threat is also used to activate certain abilities for NPCs. It might say spend 2 threat to do this. You might find that in the different rulebooks or the different adventure guides as you are playing the game. It's used to create a complication. So just like you could buy off a rolled complication and bank that as 2 threat, you can then create a complication anytime later by spending 2 threat. So just like I said, complication kind of equates to 2 points of threat. Player might roll it and you could say, okay, that's not happening now. That might come back to bite you later. You put it in the pool. Anytime you want a complication, there's 2 threat there. And you could beef it up. You could make, for example, if there was you want to create a, let's say, ion field, an ion storm. So a level 1 ion storm, that's 1 complication. You spend 2 points of threat, create that. And you want to bump it up to level 2, you'll spend more threat to bump it up level 2, level 3, level 4. You'll just keep pumping that threat out to make it however strong you need it to be. You can also use it to buy off and ignore a complication that the NPC has rolled. So if you are playing as a bad guy, you roll your dice, you roll a 20, that's a complication for you. Just like the players can use momentum to buy off complications on their own with momentum, you can buy it off by spending 2 points of threat. You can add reinforcements. This is an interesting one. When you are having a combat scene or you're just having scene with enemies, you can add extra enemies if you need to adjust the difficulty level of the encounter. There are minor NPCs. They cost 1 point of threat each. There are notable NPCs. They cost 2 points of threat each to introduce. Major NPCs are kind of like the big bads of your game, so you don't really beef up the scene by introducing them. You don't have like Locutus, the Borg Queen, Gowron, Martok, and all them charge in as one big party. So it doesn't make sense for like the big bads to be part of this, but for minions to beef up a scene, you can spend threat to add reinforcements. It can be used to trigger environmental or dangerous circumstances inside the scene. So you can pay threat to set off or set in motion something negative or some big challenge for the players to have to handle. And there's also, of course, plenty of story reasons as a GM that you might want to spend threat to adjust what is happening in the scene. One of the biggest and one of the maybe most interesting one that helps keep Star Trek Adventures as a very episodic TV show filling game is the reversal. And you see this in TV shows, you see in Star Trek definitely a lot. And a reversal is where you as the GM spend threat to just suddenly end the scene without resolution. So maybe it's by having the heroes get surrounded by a whole mob of enemies, or you get this huge warning, the warp core is about to explode, and you get everyone like dun 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 dun. That's why it goes to commercial break, it fades to black, and then the players will resume in a different scene later where they're going to now try to get out of this sticky situation. A reversal is 2 threat per every player that is in that scene that you are triggering the reversal on. So the cost depends on how many players are there. One very important rule is with the reversal, you can't actually permanently harm or kill the players by using it, because they do not have a way to react against it. They have to just accept the reversal for what it is, as a way of ending the scene, fading to black, cutting it off. So you can't do anything permanent to damage, harm, kill the players. You can put them in a terrible situation, but they have to be able to have the ability to bounce back from it. So please don't forget that. That's very important. Okay, now I have 3 tips for the GMs. 3 tips I would like to share in relation to momentum and threat. First of all, momentum should come and go constantly. GMs, you should give this players a lot of situations, a lot of chances to build up that momentum. That way they are rolling in it and they're not scared to use it. They're not thinking, oh, if I spend this, I don't know if it's coming back. You should make sure that they have a lot of chances to gain back the momentum that they are spending. It's a good thing that they have momentum. It's a good thing that they are spending momentum and succeeding at your tasks. That's not your task is being too easy. They're using the resources available to them to boost their chances of winning, and by winning, that's what you want them to do. You want them to succeed. You want them to struggle for it, but you want them to succeed. So please don't make momentum rare in your game. Let the players know that it's going to come back to them. All they have to do is just keep working at it. They are going to get it back, so they should be confident that they could use it to make the story their own exciting original story. Tip number 2 about threat. Threat should never be used to punish your players. Please do not use it to just be unfair, to antagonize them, to make life rough for them. It should be used to make the adventure, the situation, the challenge more dangerous, more exciting, more memorable, more dramatic, but it shouldn't be used to punish. So if your players succeed at something, they did something well, don't throw out threat just to make them fail. If they manage to fast talk their way past the Imperial Guard, don't dump a whole bunch of threat out to say, oh, you're caught anyhow. That is not cool. That is not nice. And it's going to make the players scared to give you threat. It's going to make the players not want you to build up that pool of threat. They're going to be too worried about you screwing them over that they're not going to go for their bold talents. They're not going to be buying threat with immediate momentum spends. They're going to do everything in their power to keep threat away from you, where threat is used to enhance the story and make things more fun when they start to get too easy, or maybe it's too dull. So please don't make players scared of your threat pool, no matter how big it may get, which leads me to threat number 3. Ooh, look at me. Tip number 3 is you should use your threat. You should use your threat pool to control the tension in the game. It's very fun. It's very easy to do. So threat is just like momentum. You should be using it constantly. You should be peppering it here and there, typically. Not always, but just keep it flowing. Make things a little more challenging here. Make a door lock a little bit more difficult than it was before, or that they assumed it was. But you can use it to control the tension in the game. If the players see you have a very small pool of threat, that gives them confidence. That gives them the idea that, oh, okay, nothing huge is going to spring up on us right now. So yeah, we could do something a little dangerous. Maybe we'll gain more threat for the GM right now to do these immediate spends. So they're a little more gung-ho about. But then you could start letting the threat build and amass bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And in that case, they're saying that, uh-oh, what's that? What is all that? That is going to turn into something soon. And they start to get a little more nervous. They start to get a little more scared about what they're doing. And you're still not spending it. So they're thinking, what is coming? That he's not using that threat. They're not using that threat yet. What is going on? So the pool itself you could use to enhance the mood of the game and help control the level of tension that you want in the game. So if you have a giant pool and then you just start peppering just a little here, a little there, and it starts going down there, like, oh, okay. Doesn't have anything that big planned. Okay, that's good. So it's a fun way, like a balloon, of just inflating and deflating the tension that the players are feeling. And there's also even the fake spends, as I like to call it, where there might be something that you are planning on having in the game anyhow, but you say, I'm spending 2 points of threat to do this, just to make the players looking like, oh no, that threat earned this for us, but it was going to come anyhow because it's baked into the game. Okay, with the tips out of the way, let me go back to the large video and have one final message before we close out this lesson. When I first started playing Star Trek Adventures, I had a complaint about threat. And I've read many similar complaints, and almost exactly the same complaint that I had from multiple people on multiple social media sites. When it comes to learning Star Trek Adventures, a lot of GMs, and again, myself included, complained about threat, saying that it is taking away our freedom to control the game as we see fit, to make the game as we see fit as a GM. It is now putting a price tag on the things we could do for free without currency in any other system we were running. Why do we have to pay for it now? It makes no sense. Why would I pay 2 points to add this extra warrior to fight when I could just say, okay, I need an extra warrior in this scene because it's going too easy, I'm adding one in. Why am I now put behind a paywall? Rest assured, I had that exact same thought, that exact same worry when I first read the rulebook before I first started GMing the game. But when I played, I thought I want to play it the way it's written in the book first to see exactly how it's designed to be. And then if there's something I don't like, I'll change it. So I used it as it was in the book. I used threat, and I think it is just one of the most crucial and most enjoyable parts of this system as a GM. Yes, it puts a price on things, but that has never stopped me from being able to alter a scene or create a scene that I want in any way. What it does is, after the scene is already in play, it's ways for you to adjust it, to change the circumstances, to change the situation, to make it more exciting and more dramatic. But again, you're thinking, I don't need currency to do that. I could do that anytime. That is very true. But I am telling you, there is a tangible and a psychological reaction to the GM using threat that is amazing. When you say that you are spending X amount of threat to do this, all the ears around the table perk up, especially the Vulcans. They all want to know what disastrous thing or what dangerous thing, what problem is rearing its head thanks to their actions that gave you threat in the game, or that you've been sitting on, that they think they have a grasp on what's happening, but now, uh-oh, here it comes. Something's changing. It also helps build trust in the players, where you say, okay, you're in the fight, they're winning the fight, and you see, oh, that fight's going too easy, we need that extra warrior coming in, here he comes running in. They're like, oh yeah, because we're winning, and that's ruining your story, right? So that's why the extra warrior is coming. But when you say, okay, like, and just before you know, 2 points of threat, there's another warrior charging down the hall. They see where it comes from. They know you're not just pulling it out of the aether, which you can, but it creates a sense of give and take where they know where it's coming from, that they know you're not just doing it to hurt them, to punish them for being successful. You're doing it because you have this toolbox that allows you to mess around with them, to make it a little more challenging. So there was so much doubt I had about using threat as a GM, but the more I played and used it according to the book, I just fell in love with it. And as I said in the tips, with tip number 3, I love using the threat pool itself just as a source of tension to make the players nervous. I love that. Even if I don't need all that threat, I love using it. I love collecting it and amassing it, so they think, oh my god, something big must be coming, something big might be coming, and maybe it never does. Now, I do have a habit of not spending all my threat all the time, but I do recommend for GMs, please use your threat liberally. Please go out and enjoy using threat to make the game more interesting, not to punish the players. But that's it. Thank you for lesson number 2. Momentum and threat. If you notice any problem, if you notice I left out anything or I made a mistake, please tell me down below in the comments. And next time I will see you in lesson 3, where I believe we are going to talk about the more advanced type of task roles and mechanics that you will encounter in the game, and that'll be it. Yeah. So thanks again. Thanks for joining Star Trek Adventures Academy. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson. As always, stay safe out there, my friends. Peace and long life. Live long and prosper.